Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Carruthers, Education Director for Sam Villa. We'd like to share with you a haircut called the Ava, and Ava's from our Modern Heritage collection. In this educational collection, we really had a goal of harnessing all of the heritage of our team. So this goes all the way back into 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and bringing a modern sensibility to it. This particular haircut's built on a really simple principle, the bob. But how do you make a bob modern and fresh? And that's really what we wanted to achieve here. So how we're going to make this bob fresh is by using the element of surface detachment. Now, if you think back to where we've been placing detachment in haircuts, primarily it's been on the underneath. We've been doing a lot of undercutting. What we're seeing is things flip upside down, and now we're seeing that detachment through the upper surface of a haircut. So that's really what's going to set this apart. Let's look at the sectioning on this. So on the Ava haircut, we have two panels of detachment up here on the top. To establish this front one, we're going to go from a center part from the forehead to the high point, and then from the high point to the tops of the ears. What that does for us is separates us into these bevels on the head. Once we have that high point to the tops of the ears, we're going to come up just a little bit to right at the parietal ridge, and we're going to connect that to the mid-recession area. We're going to do that on both sides. We're going to collect all of that together and just make sure that that's nice and tidy and out of the way, because we want to make sure that we keep these detachments clean. To establish the crown area, we're going to come from that exact same point at the high point of the ear, at that parietal, and we're going to create a V shape into the center back. And that's going to establish that crown. Same thing, make sure you get that nice and tight and out of the way. Now, a lot of our videos we're telling you not to do these little Zulu knots. And the reason for that is if you can avoid it, it's going to help you with your blow drying time. In this particular haircut, we need the isolation, and so that's why we're going with a little bit tighter of a sectioning. To start, we prepped the Ava haircut with two products. The first one is the Redken Outshine 01. The reason we went with Outshine is because we want this to have a very light texture to it. We don't want this to have a heaviness. And this product's really incredible because it's going to give me a lot of shine. It's going to give me a soft amount of control so that the hair stays more polished without getting fuzzy and fly away. But it's not going to add any weight or heaviness to it, and that's really key for this haircut. The second product that we use on almost every one of these mannequin heads especially is the Satinwear 02. Again, it gives me a really silky polish to the hair, and when I get into the blow dry phase, it's going to help create a beautiful finish, and it's going to help protect from the heat of the blow dryer. To begin our haircut, we're going to start in the center back with a center vertical section. And you'll notice I raised Ava up here because we want to get as close to eye level as possible, and that's mainly for posture, because if I need to look down on things so often when I'm cutting a one length, it's a lot about stress on my neck, and it's a huge failure point for us as hairdressers late in our career. The other thing too is if I'm cutting a one length and I need to look for my guide, I have a tendency to do this, and I lift the hair up and away from its natural fall. That's putting elevation on it, and I'm not at true natural fall. Now, I can't get her quite to eye level. If I was in the salon, I might actually sit down onto a cutting chair or possibly even have the client stand up. But I'm going to get her as high as possible. There we go. We're going to keep a sense of moisture to the hair. We don't want it sopping wet because, again, we don't need to fight through all that water in the blow dry. But we want to make sure that we have enough water in the hair to maintain control. We're going to start with that center vertical parting. So we're going to establish a horizontal parting here just below the occipital. And all the hair above it we're going to section away. Now the size of this section is really key because it needs to be thick enough that we have a really good solid guideline for the rest of our haircut. But we also don't want it so thin that we're wasting time. And especially where one length is basically a stationary guide. Everything's coming down to the same point. The thicker the section that we can take and still control, the better. We're going to mirror that section over here on the other side. Again, a horizontal section. Make sure they're parallel. And that horizontal sectioning is going to give me a guide for where to actually cut. We want to go fairly short on this, guys, so we're going to need to find out where her natural hairline is. And this is always kind of one of the challenges behind the chair, is how short can I go without basically cutting into the hairline. So on these doll heads, we can actually take this one length fairly high because the hairline doesn't come down very far. Some of your guests in the salon, you'll notice that hairline comes down pretty far, and that is going to limit how high you can take that one length. Hopefully we can bring it up a little bit just below that jawline. That's going to be a really flattering length for this. So we're going to start here in the center back, and we're going to cut inside of these bevels here in the center back. Now, if you need to find where those bevels start, all you need to do is place something flat here just behind the ear, and then flat just off your center point, and you'll see there's a corner right there, and it's called the corner back. We're just going to part that off because we want to establish what hair is really going to make up that line in the back of the head. So I'll do that on the other side, find that corner back. And that way I can really just focus on that point. I'm going to come in. Now, a lot of times we're told not to use our fingers on a one length, and there's nothing wrong with that suggestion, honestly, because all that's going to do is keep you even closer to natural fall. I actually really like to have the control of my fingers in there, so what we need to do is make sure that our fingers are as tight and as close to the head as possible, so I'm not increasing elevation too far away from the natural fall. I am going to be point cutting, so I'm not worried if there's a touch of elevation to the hair. It's just going to increase a little bit of the softness on that edge. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to point cut. Now I'm using the 6 1/4 inch signature series shear. And the reason I'm doing that is I like the balance of the length with this shear, especially when I'm doing a point cutting technique. So I'm bringing it down to natural fall. My fingers are parallel with that horizontal line that I placed into the parting. Now once I have that established, I'm going to comb it into place and make sure that I have a nice balanced line. To continue, we're going to go to these corners now. And I'm going to move her around, but what I would be doing in the salon is I'd actually be moving my lower body. I always want my lower body square with what I'm working on so that I keep a nice flat line with the floor. If my body was standing in the back while I'm trying to cut this corner, I'm going to create excess length towards the front because of natural over-direction. So you can see that's giving me a really nice, flat with the floor, very square feeling line. And that's what we want. Same thing here on the opposite side. Make sure my fingers are parallel with that parting, and just point cut the length away. I'm not doing a terribly deep point cut with this. I want it to be soft. I don't necessarily want a ton of visual texture on that bottom edge. And to continue, all I'm going to do here is take horizontal sections as I move up the head, drop down to natural fall, and continue working on this cutting line. Now, I'm going to adjust the stand and rather than moving my body for the sake of your viewing. And I just need to make sure if I'm doing this in the salon, I'm constantly putting my body in place. Through the side here, we have to be a little careful because our density changes significantly. And of course, for two reasons. One, the apparent reason is because we have about 2 inches less hair here on the side than we do in the back. And this is also the area that a lot of people have a thinner texture or even a weaker texture of hair. So we have to be really cautious here. Now, the danger comes in the fact that this hair probably will bounce up a little bit on me, especially because of the ear here. What we're going to do to adjust for that is we're going to make sure that we don't overdo our tension. I'm not going to wrench on this hair on the side and pull it down quite as taut as I did in the back. I'm going to allow there to be a little bit of slack to it, come in and just pinch the hair rather than pull the hair down, and then continue my horizontal line moving forward. And we'll make sure we do that on both sides just so we have a nice balance. Hopefully what we'll see as we do that is it'll almost seem like it's going to be slightly longer on the sides than it is in the back, and that's perfect. So that way, as we do our blow dry and these sides do pop up, we're going to get a nice balance between the front and the back. So I'm going to make sure I do the same. So we've completed the underneath bob. Now how do we make this modern? It's going to be all based on these two detachment areas, and they're actually quite simple processes. So let's do the fringe area first. When we let this down, because it's going to be detached shorter than what's below it, we need to anchor that down, and we're going to use our Samvia dry cutting clip. Because it has that little urethane band in there, it really helps to make sure that the hair stays secure. So we're going to put one of those on both sides of the head here. That's going to make sure I don't pick up that hair underneath when I'm cutting this fringe. We're going to grab our Samvia Signature Series reversible blending shear, and the reason I want to use this is this blending shear does take a little bit more hair away with each cut. So it's going to be a brilliant tool to add a really beautiful texture and take the hair away cleanly. We're going to take the entire section, and actually let's add a little bit of water to it since it's been sitting in that clip for a while. And we're going to over-direct the entire section forward. Now, one of the things I forget all the time is I kind of have monkey fingers. I've got really long hands. So I can take this entire section, condense it into one area, and just cut. Now, for some of you that maybe have smaller hands, what you want to do is just divide this in half. Go back to that center vertical parting. For those of you that have hands like mine, go ahead and take the entire section. Now, as far as how long we go, this is a really important part, because what we want to do is we want to have this outer piece, this outer corner, we actually want to have it connect to our perimeter line. Because what we're creating here is we're going to create this little piece that falls over top of our length on the side and creates this really cool diagonal back line. One of the things we know about hairdressing right now is that the shapes are moving back and away from the face. This bob actually sits very flat with the angle of her chin. So what this is going to do is bring in that element of that backward flow. All right, so again, I'm going to comb quite a few times because I want to make sure that every little grain of hair is headed in the same direction, over-directed forward. And what we're going to do is we're going to establish a horizontal line there in the front that everything is going to come to. My elevation is 90 degrees horizontal, which means I want all the grains of the hair flat with the floor. And again, my goal here is for this outside length to make sure that it touches that perimeter. So I'm going to just check that. I need a little bit more length on that as I cut. So I'm going to come out just a touch farther for that establishing the length. And again, I'm just going to check. Good. I'm going to come in with that reversible blending shear. I'm going to make sure that the still blade is on the bottom. And I'm just going to remove the hair. Now I'm just kind of coming back to that same point a couple times. And it may look like I'm just basically cutting a blunt line, but if you get in really close, what you're going to notice is that blunt line has a very soft edge to it now. And that's why it's really advantageous to you to use the reversible blending shear on a technique like this. I actually use them quite often for cutting especially blunt fringes that I still want a soft edge to. You could also do this with a razor. You could do it with a blunt shear and just do a soft point cut. The options are pretty endless. And honestly, with all of the haircuts that we teach you guys, that's what we want you thinking about, is how could I adapt this for other options within my clientele? Just going to cross-check that line, make sure it's nice and square. And so then what you're going to see here, friends, is this is going to fall down forward, be kind of close to the bridge of the nose, and then this outside corner is actually going to come all the way down and connect with our perimeter line. So it's going to create this cool little veil of diagonal back line over top of that strong horizontal line. Now, what do we do in the crown, you ask? The technique is almost identical to the fringe area. Again, we're going to take those dry cutting clips and isolate the hair underneath so we don't disturb it. Take it out of that little Zulu knot. Again, we'll mist it down just to make sure that we don't have bunching in there from how it was knotted up. All right, so we're just going to comb with the fine teeth of the comb, and it's the same idea. We're over-directing straight back to this parallel plane, and we're establishing a 90-degree horizontal elevation. I want to comb it really thoroughly with those fine teeth just to make sure that every little grain of hair is going in the same direction. That's really the one thing that's so essential when you're doing condensed cutting, is just making sure that every little grain of hair is going in the same direction. Now, same guide that we had for the front. We want to make sure that that longer outside piece is going to connect to the perimeter, which I need just a touch more length. Make sure my fingers have that nice horizontal parallel line with the back of the head. And then again, make sure that the flat blade is on the bottom. And we're just shifting back and forth on that line. It's going to create a really nice strong line with a soft edge to it. And especially since we're cutting at elevation, this isn't going to fall down as a really solid blocky line. If we were doing this at natural fall, then we actually could create a really nice solid line. In fact, sometimes I actually do my bobs exactly like this. Instead of using a point cutting technique, I will use the reversible blending shear and just do the same technique at the bottom. So again, what we end up with is an opposing line that falls forward and meets with that diagonal back from the front. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to take all our clips out. We're going to go ahead and do a wrap technique with the blow dry just to get it into a natural fall and a nice polished shape. From there, I'm going to show you some of the detailing steps, and we'll put the finish. We finished Ava's blow dry here, just a simple flat wrap, just polished the ends a little bit with our Sambia styling brush to give it a really clean but very natural finish. We don't want it over polished, over straightened. Whenever we do anything where we're cutting in more of a layer or a graduation first, what we're going to be left with is an irregular line on the perimeter, and that's just because of the irregularities in her natural hairline. So refinement on anything that we do like this is going to be coming in and just readjusting that perimeter. What we'll do is we'll just come in and gently brace that into the wide teeth of our short cutting comb, and we're just going to refine that perimeter edge a bit. And you can kind of see that there's just an irregularity. Again, that's just because of her natural hairline, and we didn't set in our perimeter before we actually did the layering portion. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, hey, you know, that's too long for my client. She actually needs to be able to see. And that's absolutely right. So on a normal client, I probably would bring this line up a little bit, but what we are seeing is we are seeing these lower hanging, very shaggy, push to the side type of fringes. So don't be afraid to leave it a little long first. You can always go shorter. The other part of refinement is whenever we cut these bobs, again, especially if we're going to use any kind of elevation, we're going to have little bits of hair that after we do the blow dry are going to hang out, especially as they move their head around. As you move your head around, tension changes around the hairline. And so if I tip my client forward, it's not going to happen with this doll head because she doesn't have natural skin. But what you're going to see is you're going to have these little edges pop out along especially the back hairline. And what we want to do is we just want to comb those out, and we're going to come in and clean those little bits up to make sure that the neckline's really perfectly refined. We truly believe that that excellent neckline is a hallmark of an excellent haircut. To just soften the detachment here, we don't want to take it away because we worked pretty hard to put it in. We're going to take a vertical section between the detachment and the crown and the perimeter. When I bring that out, now you guys can really see that detachment. I don't want to take that away because that's an element of the haircut, but I do want to soften it. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to place a few little pieces in between the 2 points. What that does is as it falls back down, there's elements of attached points, and it just softens those two together more. We'll continue doing that in vertical sections. Just come in and hit a few little pieces in between to create not necessarily a blend, just elements of attachment. And so if you look, you'll notice the side that I've done just that little element of attachment. You can see there's a big difference between this side where I have done nothing. The final thing to me that needs done is as I look at this natural line that falls towards the back from the fringe, I feel like it's just still a touch heavy. So this is where the InvisiBlend shear really comes in handy, because this shear is all about really elegant refinement and softening. So hopefully you can see on the video there's just this little bit of a line here, and again, that was on purpose because we did that in the haircut, in the detachment, but to me it's just a little too strong. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the polished blade on the InvisiBlend, put it right underneath that line, and I'm going to come through and I'm just going to softly blend out that line so that it's still present, because again, we worked hard to make it present, but now it just has a little more swing and softness to it to float over top of that really strong horizontal line. From this point, it's all up to you guys. You have the option and you have the ability to detail this haircut in whatever way that suits your guest the best. So let's do a quick review on the basics of the haircut. Again, sectioning's everything, so that's our first step. We create a center parting from the forehead to the high point, and then high point to the top of the ear. To block off this fringe area, we're going to go just to about the mid-parietal ridge between that high point and the ear, and we're going to connect to the recession area, just about the mid-recession. We're going to do that on both sides, bring it together, knot it up, make sure it's really well isolated. To create the crown area, we're going to come from that same point at the parietal, just above the top of the ear, and we're going to V-shape into the center back right at the bottom edge of the crown. Again, isolate that really cleanly. Our bob shape is just very simple. Start with a center vertical parting down the back, horizontal sections, and again, guys, remember to adjust those sections based on the density of your client's hair. Cut really flat with the floor and move your body with the head shape. That's really essential so that you don't overdirect the hair. Also remember, as we come into these sides, use low tension so that you don't pull too tightly, and you can see what happens by keeping that tension low. We get a really nice square line through the sides there, and allows there to have that touch of length right at that front edge, which is an important feature to the overall haircut. The detachment that we cut first is the fringe area. We dropped all that down, over direct forward to that horizontal parallel line right in front of her face. Make sure that your elevation is 90 degrees parallel with the floor, so 90 degrees horizontal. At that point, establish a length that longest point is going to reach all the way down to your perimeter, and cut that using the blending shear so that you have a strong line that has a soft edge. The crown area here in the back, it's basically the same thing. Once again, 90 degrees horizontal elevation. Over direction is back now to a horizontal plane. And again, we want to make sure that that longest point reaches the perimeter. So what you see from the side, and I think this is such a cool part of this haircut, is it creates almost this V shape from the profile where it comes down into this strong weight right above the ear. Very interesting profile, something that we don't really see in most bobs. Refinement, again, comes down to refining this perimeter edge on the fringe and, of course, the bob area, and then going through and softening any lines of detachment that you feel are a little too strong. Please, guys, don't get hung up on every little piece having to touch each other. This is a detached haircut on purpose, and that's what creates these focal points. If I go through and all I do is blend back through all those detachments, guess what? I just have a layered bob once again. So we really hope you've enjoyed the Ava haircut from our Modern Heritage collection. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm Andrew Carruthers, educator.